What is a crepuscular ray?
A less technical name for a crepuscular ray would be a sunbeam, such as can be seen when streams of sunlight emerge from behind a cloud during the twilight hours. Crepuscule means twilight. In the Bible, they may have inspired the story of Jacob's ladder. Genesis 28:11-19, and so they are often named after that story. Another descriptive phrase for crepuscular rays is the sun drawing water, because people once believed that the beams of light were actually formed by water being sucked up into the sun. Because these rays are seen as clouds are breaking up, folklore rightfully interprets them as a sign that good weather will likely be ahead.
What is a person's circadian rhythm?
Human beings have evolved in a world where there are regular cycles of day and night. And we have thus developed a kind of internal clock that makes us want to sleep at night and be awake during the day. This occurs even when we are, say, underground or in an enclosed factory, with no windows, where there are no visual cues as to the time of day. The circadian rhythm controls such bodily functions as peristalsis, movement of food through the digestive tract, leading eventually to excretion, blood pressure, melatonin secretion, hormone levels, and alertness versus fatigue. In our modern world, people have tried to adjust to lifestyles that are not exactly commensurate with their circadian rhythms. Electricity and other sources of power allow us to work late at night, drive vehicles, and operate machinery at times when our bodies would rather be asleep. The result is that more accidents involving cars and factory equipment happen at night than during the day. We are also much less efficient at night, even when doing safe activities like balancing the checkbook.
Which freezes more quickly, cold or hot water?
An old wives' tale that still circulates in American homes is that if you wish to freeze ice quickly in an ice tray, put hot tap water in it and then put it in the freezer. Of course, many homes have automatic ice dispensers in their refrigerators, so this tale is beginning to die out somewhat. Let's dispel the myth now, however, and say that, no, hot water will not freeze faster than cold. However, what does work is boiling the water, then allowing it to cool down to a tepid temperature. Boiling the water removes air bubbles in the water, increasing thermal conductivity, and allowing the water to freeze more quickly. Of course, the time wasted boiling the water and then allowing it to cool would have been better spent by simply putting lukewarm water in the freezer in the first place. Not to mention that it would be more energy efficient not to boil the water.
Does dew fall?
While this is a common expression, dew does not actually fall. A point that was proven in a demonstration conducted by Scottish-American physicist William Charles Wells, 1757 to 1817. In 1814, Wells showed that dew actually formed on surfaces as water vapor condensed.
Is there a difference between the Farmer's Almanac and the Old Farmer's Almanac?
The Old Farmer's Almanac was first published in 1792 under the editorial leadership of Robert B. Thomas, 1766 to 1846, and is currently published out of Dublin, New Hampshire. The similarly titled Farmer's Almanac debuted in 1818 in Ohio. The founding editor was David Young, d. 1852, and the publication is now headquartered in Lewiston, Maine. They are, indeed, different publications, although more confusion arises from the fact that initially, the Old Farmer's Almanac was called the Farmer's Almanac for a number of years. Both, though, are almanacs, which means they include information about upcoming astronomical events, such as tides, sunrises and sunsets, lunar cycles, and so on. For added interest, they include cooking recipes, gardening tips, nature news, and advice columns. Published annually, they also both make predictions about the weather for the coming year, which is what made them desirable books for farmers to own. Both books claim to have secret formulas for predicting the weather the most accurately, with the Old Farmer's Almanac claiming it has an accuracy of 80%. Meteorologists dispute such claims, though, and also note that the almanacs make broad generalities about weather forecasts that makes them hard to refute. For instance, a prediction for spring might say that the Midwest will experience more rain than usual.
What standard unit of measurement is used to indicate wind speed?
In most forecasts in the United States, wind speed is described in miles per hour. Outside this country, it would be expressed in kilometers per hour. Most other scientists also prefer to use the metric system. However, the Federal Aviation Administration, National Weather Service, and other groups that work with air and ocean travel will use knots. 1 knot equals 1.15 miles per hour, or 1.85 kilometers per hour. Internationally, wind is also commonly measured in meters per hour. For vertical wind speeds, meteorologists use bars per second, which indicates pressure change with altitude over time, or centimeters per second.
What replaced the WSR-57S?
WSR-74S were added to the radar grid in 1974 and were used in conjunction with the older 57s, as they were called. It was not until 1988, however, that the next generation radar, NEXRAD, also called WSR-88D, were built using the newer Doppler technology. The first NEXRAD was deployed in Norman, Oklahoma. In 1990. There are now 160 NEXRAD radar stations throughout the United States.
How did the last ice age begin and end?
Approximately 1.7 million years ago, the beginning of the Quaternary period. Pleistocene epoch, geologists believe the plains of North America cooled. As a result, large ice sheets began to advance south from the Hudson Bay area of Canada and eastward from the Rocky Mountains. These ice sheets advanced and retreated many times toward the end of the Pleistocene epoch in intervals lasting from 10,000 to 100,000 years. This most recent ice age ended about 10,000 years ago, when the ice retreated to its present polar positions. Currently, the Earth is nearing the end of an interglacial, warmer period, meaning that another ice age might be due in a few thousand years.
What did Benjamin Franklin contribute to the science of meteorology?
Benjamin Franklin, 1706 to 1790, who is said to have discovered electricity by flying a kite in a storm and who later invented the lightning rod, made the important discovery that low-pressure systems caused the atmosphere to circulate in a rotating pattern. He made this discovery in 1743, after unsuccessfully attempting to view an eclipse on October 21. There was a storm in Philadelphia at the time, but he later learned that the skies were clear in Boston that day. Of course, he wasn't able to take an airplane to Massachusetts. But what he did find out the next day was that the storm that had been in Philadelphia had traveled to Boston. From this information, he surmised that the storm was traveling in a clockwise manner from southwest to northeast. Putting two and two together, Franklin concluded that the low-pressure system was causing the storm to move in this manner.
What are cheronophobia and brontophobia?
Cheronophobia is the fear of lightning, and brontophobia, sometimes called tonitrophobia, is the fear of thunder.
What are Aitken nuclei?
The discovery that the air is full of tiny particles around which water droplets may condense to create clouds was made by Scottish physicist John Aitken, 1839 to 1919. We usually just call them nuclei today, but, more formally, these particles are called Aitken nuclei.
How many active volcanoes are there?
Currently, there are somewhere between 850 and 1,500 known active volcanoes on our planet. There are 63 active volcanoes in the United States, mostly in Alaska, Hawaii, and in the Pacific Northwest. At any given time, about 10 or 12 volcanoes are erupting planet-wide.
What is the Landsat program?
In 1972, NASA launched the first Landsat, land satellite, in cooperation with the U.S. Geological Survey, while taking photos and measurements related to the planet's surface. These satellites also provide a considerable amount of weather-related information. For example, Landsat satellite data has recorded the impacts of weather disasters, monitors flooding, and takes other measurements of interest to hydrologists. Recent surveys of land use have also resulted in studies about the effects of human activities on weather. For example, in 2006, an atmospheric modeling study was conducted on the state of Florida. Scientists compared estimates of vegetation coverage in the year 1900 with present conditions and demonstrated how urban and rural activities were affecting rainfall. It was estimated that Florida now experiences 12% less rain than it would have a century ago.
What hurricane names have been retired?
Hurricane names are retired when a particularly bad storm has caused a great deal of damage and loss of life. Countries affected by such hurricanes will petition the WMO to have the name retired and replaced with a new name. Gustav and Ike, both 2008 hurricanes, may also be retired.
What is orbital inclination?
Not only does our planet tilt back and forth and wobble while it's doing it, but it also ranges up and down relative to the invariable plane, the plane. In simplified terms, passing through the solar system's center of mass. If you imagine the Earth's orbit as forming a disk like a CD, then imagine the CD wobbling back and forth instead of spinning on a level plane. Formed by the invariable plane, then you might get the idea of orbital inclination. The current orbital inclination of the Earth causes it to pass through the invariable plane in early January and early July. The invariable plane carries with it more space dust and debris than is found above and below this plane. Thus, as the Earth passes through the invariable plane, the atmosphere comes in contact with more space dust, which means we see more meteor showers and meteorites. The space dust also contributes to cloud formation in the upper atmosphere, noctilucent clouds.
How high up does the atmosphere reach?
The end of the atmosphere is not like the horizon, where you can definitely say, this is where the Earth ends and the atmosphere begins. Rather, as one travels higher and higher, the atmosphere gets thinner and thinner. One can say, for practical purposes, that the upper atmosphere begins to be indistinguishable from outer space at about 435 miles, 700 kilometers altitude, but that is really just a random place to draw the borderline. The density of the atmosphere is getting very thin indeed at an elevation of 370 miles. About 600 kilometers. At this height, there are about 6 miles, 10 kilometers. Between each molecule, this gap is known as the mean free path. The air pressure here is, effectively, zero.
What is a solar prominence?
Prominences are high-density streams of solar gas projecting outward from the Sun's surface. Photosphere, into the inner part of the corona. They can be more than 100,000 miles long and can maintain their shapes for days, weeks, or even months before breaking down.
What is the snow line?
The term snow line can refer to two different things. 1. The elevation on a hill or mountainside above which snow has fallen and below which the precipitation turns to rain. Or 2. The latitude north of which is covered by snow.
What are chilblains?
Chilblains refers to the burning, itching, redness, and chapping that can occur when skin suffers prolonged exposure to cold, damp weather conditions.
What other countries also have weather satellites in orbit?
Currently, the following countries have weather satellite programs: Japan, Russia, China, India, South Korea, and Europe, European Space Agency. Japan launched its geosynchronous meteorological satellite Himawari in 1995, but in 2003 it malfunctioned. And so NOAA permitted the Japan Meteorological Agency use of the older GOES-9 satellite. The European Organization for the Exploitation of Meteorological Satellites, EUMETSAT, operates what is now the second generation of Meteosat satellites. Europe launched its first weather satellite in 1995. And this second generation came online in 2004 with Meteosat 8. This satellite scans the entire globe every 15 minutes. China launched the Fenyun in 1990, and there have been several successors since then. That same year, Russia launched GOMS, Geosynchronous Operational Meteorological Satellite. The Indian satellite, INSAT, made orbit in 1990 and was used for both weather observations and communications. It was followed by INSAT 2 through INSAT 4 series, before the Kalpana 1 was operational. In 2002, the Kalpana 1 satellite is India's first exclusively meteorological satellite. South Korea's first weather satellite is the Communication, Ocean and Meteorological Satellite, COMS, which was launched in 2005.
What is a sun pillar?
Sun pillars are streaks of white or reddish light that extend vertically by as much as 20 degrees from the sun, occurring most often at sunrise and sunset. Like halos and corona, sun pillars are seen because of ice crystals in the atmosphere. In populated areas, when icy fog occurs, sun pillars can sometimes be seen around street lights.
What ancient Chinese book first discussed the idea of solar winds?
Although the Chinese discussed the idea of energy from the sun in terms of the notion of qi energy, the Book of Jin observed back in 635 C. E that comet tails always pointed away from the sun. The unknown author understood that this was the result not of wind in our atmosphere, but rather from energy emitted by the sun itself.
How does air flow around low and high pressure systems?
Air tends to flow toward a low pressure system and away from a high pressure system. In the northern hemisphere, the air will spiral in a counterclockwise direction as it moves toward a low pressure center, and it will move in a clockwise direction as it shifts away from a high pressure center.
Can the relative humidity ever be higher than 100%?
No. It was once theorized that when clouds are in a state called supersaturation, it was possible to have a relative humidity of slightly over 100%, but this has since been proven false.
What is the ozone layer?
The ozone layer is part of the stratosphere, a layer of the Earth's atmosphere that lies about 10 to 30 miles. 16 to 48 kilometers, above the surface of the Earth. Ozone, O3, is like regular gaseous oxygen, O2, with an extra oxygen atom attached to it. It is created when short-wavelength ultraviolet radiation interacts with O2 molecules. The energy from the radiation breaks the molecules apart, which then recombine into ozone. The ozone layer is important because it protects life on Earth from harmful ultraviolet radiation. While it does not absorb all of this radiation, otherwise, it would be impossible for you to get a tan. It prevents about 80% of it from reaching life on Earth. As anyone who knows about melanoma can tell you, too much ultraviolet radiation can lead to cancer. Before the ozone layer was discovered, someone must have discovered ozone.
How many people are killed in the United States by lightning?
The U.S. total from 1959 to 2003 is 3,696 deaths. About 60 people die each year from lightning, about 300 are injured annually. The highest death rates are in Florida, 425 killed between 1959 and 2003. Making it the most dangerous state to live in when it comes to lightning injuries. Below is a state-by-state listing using the most recent data from NOAA.
How are supercooled droplets used for the purpose of cloud seeding?
Cloud seeding is a method for encouraging rain droplets to form in clouds. An experiment was conducted in 1946 by chemist and meteorologist Vincent Schaefer, 1906 to 1993, and physicist, chemist, and Nobel laureate Irving Langmuir, 1881 to 1957, in which dry ice, frozen carbon dioxide, at -109 degrees Fahrenheit -78 degrees Celsius was placed inside a cloud chamber containing cloud droplets chilled to -40 degrees Fahrenheit -40 degrees Celsius. The result was that rain droplets formed. The next step was to conduct the experiment in a real-life situation. In the winter of 1946, Schaefer and Langmuir had dry ice placed in an airplane, which then dumped the load into a bank of stratocumulus clouds. They were pleased to see success when the dry ice caused a snow flurry to develop. American physicist Bernard Vonnegut, 1914 to 1997, who also worked with Schaefer, later experimented with other chemicals to see what else would be an effective way to seed clouds. He found that silver iodide, which is still used today, could perform the task well. Since then, other substances have been used to seed clouds, including sea salt and even water droplets. However, all these methods appear to work best in the winter. During warmer months, seeding clouds has proved to be more problematic, because the correct conditions to produce precipitation are less common.
What is a derecho?
Pronounced derecho, this is large, long-lived thunderstorm characterized by strong wind downbursts.
What are some other effects of ultraviolet radiation?
Small amounts of ultraviolet, UV, radiation can actually be good for you because it aids in the production of vitamin D in the body. However, you only need about 10 to 15 minutes of sunlight exposure a day to get this benefit. Not getting enough sunlight leads to vitamin D depletion, which can lead to depression and other symptoms in humans and is, indeed, a chronic problem in populations located in northern and extreme southern climates. Besides the risks of cancer, especially melanoma, overexposure to UV radiation can cause cataracts or inflammation of the cornea, snow blindness. If exposure is not too long, the eye can heal itself from this inflammation. But prolonged exposure could lead to permanent blindness. Cancer of the eye is also a possibility. It is also believed that too much UV radiation weakens immune systems. Those studies are still being conducted to more fully understand this health risk. Interestingly, it has also been found that in areas where ozone levels are lower and more UV radiation penetrates to ground level, certain construction materials such as wood and some plastics degrade at a higher rate than normal. High UV levels also, of course, affect plants and animals, though some are at a higher risk than others. Scientists have learned, for example, that soybean crops and some types of rice could die if the ozone were too severely depleted. Also, young pine tree needles are damaged by UV light. But mature needles, which have a waxy coating, are protected. In the oceans, some forms of plankton could die or be severely depleted if the ozone was not doing its job. The result would be a breakdown in ocean food chains that could be devastating. The effects on wild animals are not well known, though nocturnal animals would likely be unaffected. And many diurnal animals have fur or feathers that protect them from radiation. However, skin around the eyes and ears are often more exposed to the sunlight. And animals would be as susceptible to eye problems as much as humans.
How much does air pollution damage crops in the United States?
It is estimated that the United States loses millions of dollars in crops every year because of air pollution. In the East, crop reductions cost about $3 billion in losses annually. And farmland near such cities as Los Angeles and Chicago is far less productive than land far from such cities.
When did radar finally catch on, and who gets the credit?
In 1935, over 3 decades after Hulsmeyer first proposed the idea, radar technology came into its own through the work of British scientist Robert Watson Watt, 1892 to 1973, along with H. E. Wimperis, 1876–1960, Henry Tizard, 1885–1959, and A. F. Wilkins. Working for the British government. Watson Watt was given the assignment of investigating weather. Germany's Adolf Hitler could carry out a threat of creating a weapon using radio waves. Watson Watt knew this was an impossibility, but he saw another potential use. Using shortwave radio transmitters from the British Broadcasting Corporation. He and his colleagues created the first practical radar technology. Radar was used to detect attacking German airplanes during World War II, and was credited with swaying the 1940 Battle of Britain in England's favour.
What is pose?
POSE is an acronym for Polar Operational Environmental Satellite. These are the successors to the TIROS satellites, and they are thus called the Advanced Television Infrared Observation Satellites, ATN or TIROS-N. Like the GOES, there are two POSE operated by the U.S. Department of Defense's Air Force Space and Missile Systems Center in what is called the Defense Meteorological Satellite Program. The POSE orbit the Earth at elevations ranging from 515 to 540 miles, 830 to 870 kilometers in altitude, with one crossing the equator at 7:30 a.m. and 1:40 p.m. Data is then transmitted to stations located at Wallops Island, Virginia, and in Fairbanks, Alaska.
How do radars use the Doppler effect to measure the weather?
Doppler radar, unlike conventional radar systems that could only indicate where a storm was and how intense it was, can be used to detect wind speed and the direction storms are taking. Because one Doppler radar can only tell if a storm is heading away or toward it, a network of radars is needed to chart a storm's precise course.
How is the time set for the beginning of sunrise and sunset?
In the United States, sunrise officially begins when the leading edge of the sun disk first begins to rise over the horizon, and sunset happens when the top of the sun disappears behind the horizon. In Great Britain, however, sunrise and sunset are measured by the time when the middle of the sun is at the edge of the horizon. Scientists use highly sensitive light measuring instruments to calculate when dawn is approaching as much as 90 minutes before sunrise actually occurs.
What is a dry front?
A dry front, also called a dry line or dew point front, is a borderline separating a mass of dry air from one of much more humid air. Often found east of the Rocky Mountains, these fronts will find the warmer Drier air lifting the cooler, more humid air ahead of it in the higher altitudes. While humid air near the ground is denser than the dry air and the drier air will flow over it. The result is an air mass reversal that can precipitate the formation of cumulonimbus clouds, thunderstorms, and, quite often, tornadoes.
What is a bishop's ring?
A bishop's ring is a ring usually with a reddish outer edge that is seen around the Sun. It is probably due to dust particles in the air, since it is seen after all significant volcanic eruptions.
What is more dangerous, a big tornado with a funnel spanning over a mile in diameter, or a narrow, speedy tornado?
Either one can be equally dangerous. Many factors are involved when considering how lethal and destructive a tornado may be, including how fast the vortex is spinning and how much debris is being blown around.
What is the Fujita and Pearson tornado scale?
The Fujita and Pearson tornado scale, usually just referred to as the Fujita scale, was introduced in 1971 by University of Chicago professor T. Theodore Fujita, 1920 to 1998, and Alan Pearson, 1925. Who was then the director of the National Severe Storms Forecast Center. The scale ranked tornadoes by their wind speed, path, length, and width. The ranking ranges from F0, very weak, to F5, incredibly destructive. This scale was replaced in 2007 by the enhanced Fujita scale.
Have neutrinos ever been shown to have hit Earth from somewhere other than the Sun?
In 1987, the first supernova visible to the unaided eye to occur in centuries appeared in the southern sky. At almost exactly that same moment, neutrino detectors around the world recorded a total of 19 more neutrino reactions than usual. This worldwide detection does not sound like much, but it was hugely significant because it was the first time neutrinos were confirmed to have reached Earth from a specific celestial object other than the Sun.
What is a tropical depression?
A tropical depression consists of a line of organized storms with wind speeds below 38 miles. 61 kilometers per hour. Tropical depressions have the potential to become tropical storms or hurricanes.
Does lightning ever strike twice in the same place?
Lightning can and often does strike in the same place twice. Since lightning bolts head for the highest and most conductive point, that point often receives multiple strikes of lightning in the course of a storm, so stay away from something that has already been struck by lightning. Tall buildings, such as the Empire State Building, often receive numerous lightning strikes during a storm.
How does snow form?
Snow forms in clouds in much the same way as water. Water vapor in the clouds collects around nuclei made out of dust or other particles in a cloud. When the temperature within the cloud is cold enough, and the water molecules begin to make contact with one another, they form crystals. And when the crystals become sufficiently heavy, gravity takes over and they fall to the ground. The distinctive hexagonal crystal pattern of snowflakes occurs because of the six-fold molecular symmetry of ice. Water is composed of one oxygen bonding with two hydrogen atoms in a kind of V-shaped configuration. When the temperature is cold enough and the molecules of water are drawn together, they naturally form into hexagonal rings. This pattern continues as the snowflake grows until it is apparent to the naked eye.
What are sun dogs and moon dogs?
When ice crystals are present in the air, the light from the sun or moon can be reflected, causing bright spots to appear on either side of these heavenly bodies. Sundogs, also called mock suns or parhelions, are sometimes so bright that they look like two companion suns appearing at angles of about 22 degrees on either side of the sun.
How clean is rainwater?
Rainwater, at least, when it is not acid rain, is normally very pure, except for the small particle around which the raindrop originally formed. Once the raindrop hits the ground and is absorbed into the soil or evaporates, it leaves behind this nucleus, which is often formed from such matter as a dust speck or tiny grain of salt.
Who first described the phenomenon of acid rain?
Scottish chemist Robert Angus Smith, 1817 to 1884, who was very interested in water pollution and other issues regarding the environment and public health, conducted research in which he discovered, in 1852, that air pollution was causing acid rain. Smith also helped found the discipline of chemical climatology, and was the author of the influential 1872 book Air and Rain.
How does the United States compare with China and Russia on energy use and production?
As of 2007, the United States gets 50% of its energy from coal and in 2006, was burning 3 times as much oil, 21 million barrels, a day as China. America burns slightly less natural gas annually than Russia, which uses 604 billion cubic meters per year.
Where are the neutrinos coming from?
The vast majority of neutrinos striking our planet come from the Sun. The nuclear reactions at the core of the Sun create huge numbers of neutrinos. And unlike the light that is produced, which takes thousands of years to flow their way out of the Sun's interior, the neutrinos come out of the Sun in less than 3 seconds, reaching Earth in just 8 minutes.
What are some other sunspot minimums and maximums?
Below is a list of notable sunspot activity changes dating back to 1000 C. Some of the names for these maximums and minimums come from their discoverers, including German astronomer Gustav Sporer. 1822 to 1895, English meteorologist John Dalton. 1766 to 1844, English astronomer Edward W. Maunder, 1851 to 1928, and Swiss astronomer Johann Rudolf Wolf, 1816 to 1893.
What is the National Center for Atmospheric Research, NCAR?
Established by the National Academy of Sciences in 1956, the NCAR is based in Boulder, Colorado, and is staffed by, mostly, university scientists who use such tools as radar, airplanes, and supercomputers to help the scientific community better understand the many processes that affect weather. The goal is to increase cooperation between universities and draw on their combined resources in order to accomplish what a single university could not do on its own.
What is the current extent of deforestation?
Worldwide, we are losing enough forest land annually to cover an area the size of the state of Panama. To put that figure into numbers, that is a net loss of 7.3 million hectares, 18 million acres, every year. Actually, about 13 million hectares, 32 million acres, are being chopped down yearly. But there are restoration projects going on that help replant forests. This rate of loss, which is an average taken from the years 2000 through 2005, is somewhat better than the 8.9 million hectare, 22 million acre, loss that was experienced during the previous decade. Although replanting is great, new forest growth does not make for as healthy a habitat for wildlife as old forest growth.
What was the solar neutrino problem?
From the very beginning of neutrino astronomy research, there was a discrepancy between the theory of nuclear fusion and the number of neutrinos detected from the Sun. Neutrino telescopes on Earth detected only about half as many neutrinos as they should have. This strange result was checked again and again and repeatedly confirmed. This became known as the solar neutrino problem.
What military battle was cancelled because of a mirage?
During World War I, a battle between British and Ottoman forces in April 1916 was cancelled because a mirage made it impossible for the combatants to see one another.
How is the ionosphere important in the transmission of radio waves?
When ultraviolet light enters the atmosphere, it ionizes atoms in the ionosphere through a process called photoionization, which releases free electrons into this region of the atmosphere. It is these free electrons that make radio wave transmissions possible. Depending on the frequency of the radio waves, transmissions travel for shorter or longer distances. Lower frequency waves bounce off the ionosphere at a lower elevation, and thus travel a shorter distance than higher frequency waves. Very high frequency waves are used when communicating with satellites or anything out in space because they can completely escape the atmosphere. British physicist Oliver Heaviside, 1850 to 1925, and American electrical engineer Arthur Edwin Kennelly, 1861 to 1939, independently theorized the existence of an ionosphere, and that certain wave frequencies would bounce off it and be reflected back to Earth. It was radio pioneer Guglielmo Marconi, 1874 to 1937, who first took advantage of this theory. To conduct the first transmission from Cornwall, England, to Newfoundland in 1901. The waves became known as radio waves, and Marconi is credited as the inventor of the radio. The E region of the ionosphere was named after Kennelly and Heaviside to honor their work.
What are solstices and when do they occur?
A solstice is a time of the year when Earth is pointed either the closest toward the Sun or the farthest away from it. On the summer solstice, there are more minutes of daylight than there are on any other day of the year. On the winter solstice, there are fewer minutes of daylight than there are on any other day of the year. In the northern hemisphere, the summer solstice occurs around June 21st of each year, when the North Pole is pointed closest toward the Sun, and the winter solstice occurs around December 21st of each year, when the North Pole is pointed farthest away from the Sun.
Besides rime frost, what other types of frost are there?
Different weather conditions can cause frost to form in various ways. Sometimes with spectacularly beautiful results. The types of frost include advection, wind. Frost is frost that forms on the edges of plants and other objects. Advection frost is formed on the upwind side of objects during very cold winds. Fern, window, frost gets its name from the fern-like patterns it forms on windows. Especially windows that are not well insulated. Flaws in the glass's surface provide the nucleus needed for water vapors to form crystals, which then radiate outwards in intricate patterns. Frost flowers are the result of a rare interaction between plants and the weather. When water inside a plant stem cracks or splits due to the cold, the water can escape and then freeze into flower-like shapes. Because they are so fragile, frost flowers usually break apart or melt within hours of forming. Hoar, radiation, frost is formed on clear nights when surface objects are colder than the surrounding air. It appears as white, loosely organized crystals. Hoarfrost may appear similar to rime, but unlike rime it is formed without the presence of mist or fog.
Can I get a cold from being out in cold weather?
The fact that it is cold will not, in itself, cause you to become sick. The reason why colds become more prevalent in winter is that people tend to stay indoors more, where they come into contact more frequently with other people, some of whom may be carrying viruses or illness-causing bacteria. Also, indoor heating systems run constantly in colder regions. Anyway, and the environment inside homes and buildings may not be all that healthy. Germs can proliferate in, for example, air filters and air ducts that have not been properly cleaned. Sometimes, too, people can be exposed to too much carbon monoxide. And the early symptoms of carbon monoxide poisoning can mimic those of a common cold. To help avoid winter colds, it is wise to wash your hands regularly and, when in public areas, try and keep your hands away from your mouth, nose, and eyes. Recent studies have also shown that a good night's sleep, 8 hours, helps to reduce the chances of getting a cold by 66%.
How wide is a lightning bolt?
Because of the intense glow of light that is emitted from lightning bolts, they may appear much wider than they actually are. The speed of lightning can vary from 100 to 1,000 miles. 160 to 1,600 kilometers per second for the downward leader track. The return stroke is 87,000 miles. 140,000 kilometers per second, almost the speed of light.
How many Category 5 hurricanes have there been since 1920?
The Saffir-Simpson scale was not invented until 1971, however. Reliable records on hurricane wind speeds and storm surges have been kept since the 1920s. According to such data, there have been 31 Category 5 hurricanes in the Atlantic since 1928. 8 of those have occurred since 2003, 4 in 2005 alone, which is one piece of evidence some climatologists point to when talking about global warming and its effects on tropical storm intensity. Of all those hurricanes, only 4 have actually made landfall on U.S. territory. Others have struck Central America or islands in the Caribbean, or they have weakened to Category 4 or below before reaching Puerto Rico or the Gulf Coast or Atlantic seaboard. Below is a chronological list of Category 5 hurricanes.
What methods have been used to try to remove hazardous fog?
Helicopters have been used in the past to try and blow away fog. And in France people have used jet engines at airports to heat up the air. Both of these methods are very impractical, however.
How fast does the seafloor spread?
Today, the rates of seafloor spreading vary from about 1 inch, 2.54 centimeters per year in the mid-Atlantic ridge area to about 6 inches, 15 centimeters, in the mid-Pacific Ocean. Scientists believe seafloor spreading rates have varied over time. For example, during the Cretaceous period, between 146 to 65 million years ago, seafloor spreading was extremely rapid. Some researchers believe this quick movement of the lithospheric plates may have also contributed to the demise of the dinosaurs. As the continents changed places over time, so did the climate. In addition, more plate movements might have meant more volcanic activity, releasing dust, ash, and gases into the upper atmosphere and contributing to more climate variation. This change in climate and vegetation may have caused several species of dinosaurs to die out or become diseased, contributing to the dinosaurs' extinction.
What are the types of snowflakes as identified in the International Classification System?
The types of snowflakes have been stellar plates, as the name indicates, are star-like flakes that are flat, distinctly hexagonal, with 6 broad arms. Sectored plates are similar to stellar plates, but also have prominent ridges pointing to each of the 6 facets in the plate. Double plates occur when 2 stellar plates are connected by a cap. Usually, one plate is much larger than the other. Split plates and stars happen when parts of 2 separate plates merge to form one plate that if not closely inspected, looks like a single six-armed plate. For example, a partial plate containing two arms could merge with one that has four arms left, leaving a six-armed plate that appears like a complete single plate. Simple prisms tiny, six-armed. Flat snowflakes that are hard to distinguish with the naked eye, but are a very common form. Stellar dendrites have tree-like arms. Dendritic means tree-like, with multiple branches extending from each of the six arms. Fern-like stellar dendrites are stellar dendrites with more frilly, fern-like branches. Radiating dendrites, spatial dendrites, are dendrites that have arms extending not just in two dimensions, but in three. Capped columns look like columns that have six flat sides. Imagine two hexagons that are joined together. Hollow columns are similar to capped columns, except the ends of the columns are hollow or devoted. 12-sided snowflakes when two six-sided plates join together at a 30-degree angle. They form what appears to be a 12-armed plate or capped column.
What is anemophobia?
A fear of the wind and sometimes even mere drafts is known as anemophobia.
Is there a difference between a forecast of partly sunny or partly cloudy skies?
Yes. The difference is that partly cloudy refers to a sky that is mostly clear with some clouds in it, while partly sunny is a sky that has more cloud cover than clear patches.
How much do meteorologists earn?
You should never pick a career solely based on its earning potential. Pick something you love, and then go from there. That being said, meteorologists make very good wages indeed. As of 2009, average salaries ranged from $70,000 to $108,000 annually. On the low end, the salary for a degree-holding meteorologist was about $53,000, at the upper end. A meteorologist in a specialized field with a PhD can easily make $125,000 a year.
What happened at 3 Mile Island?
Three Mile Island, Pennsylvania, was the site of the United States' worst nuclear accident. Luckily, no radiation was released into the environment and no one was killed. In March 1979, the nuclear reactor at the 3 Mile Island plant overheated, breaking the radioactive rods. Pennsylvania's governor recommended a voluntary evacuation of pregnant women and preschool children who lived within 5 miles, 8 kilometers, of the plant. It was the unexpected self-evacuation of residents in the area that created major problems. The evacuations yielded surprising information about the lack of preparedness of communities for such an event, and have led to increased planning and preparedness for nuclear accidents and evacuations.
Who was the Snowflake Man?
American photographer and farmer Wilson A. Bentley, 1865 to 1931, was nicknamed the Snowflake Man, or just Snowflake Bentley, because he photographed images of over 2,400 snowflakes. His stunning photo collection capturing the natural beauty of snowflakes was published in 1931. Snow crystals. Needles look just like the name, thin, long ice crystals. They usually form when the temperature is about 23 degrees Fahrenheit -5 degrees Celsius. Triangular crystals often form at temperatures of about 28 degrees Fahrenheit -2 degrees Celsius, and are rather like deformed stellar flakes where half the arms are not fully formed, creating a triangle shape as a result. Bullet rosettes happen when several columns melt and freeze together, looking like several crystal bullets merged at the heads at odd angles to each other. Rimmed crystals occur when additional water droplets freeze onto already formed snowflakes, giving them a fuzzy appearance. Irregular crystals are snowflakes that are a rather disorganized mess of multiple snowflakes that have broken up and melted together.
What is the largest known meteor to disintegrate in Earth's atmosphere in recent times?
In the night of June 30, 1908, villagers near the Tunguska River in Siberia witnessed a fireball streaking through the sky. A burst of light, a thunderous sound, and an enormous blast. 1,000 miles away. In Irkutsk, Russia, a seismograph recorded what appeared to be a distant earthquake. This area was so remote, however, that a scientific expedition to the site did not happen until 1927. Incredibly, they found more than 1,000 square miles of burned and flattened forest. Modern scientific computations have shown that this incredible explosion was probably caused by a small rocky asteroid or comet about 100 feet, 30 meters, across. Computer simulations show that it most likely came into Earth's atmosphere at a shallow angle and exploded in mid-air above the forest. The explosion packed a punch easily greater than 1,000 Hiroshima atomic bombs.
How is pollution related to weather?
Pollution, both natural and man-made, has numerous, often complex effects on the weather. Air pollutants, for instance, can cause acid rain. And pollution that destroys the ozone layer can lead to health risks to people and even wipe out species. Many scientists believe that human-generated pollution is causing climate change, which affects weather patterns on a global scale. While some pollutants, such as gases from volcanic eruptions, can have harmful consequences, many meteorologists, environmentalists, and climatologists fear that human activity is having a much bigger negative impact on the weather and our health than anything currently occurring from natural sources.
At what temperature does seawater freeze?
While the amount of salt and other minerals and impurities in seawater makes a difference. In general, seawater freezes at about 28 degrees Fahrenheit minus 2.2 degrees Celsius.
What are halcyon days?
This term is often used to refer to a time of peace or prosperity. Among sailors, it is the 2-week period of calm weather before and after the shortest day of the year. Approximately December 21st. The phrase is taken from halcyon, the name the ancient Greeks gave to the kingfisher. According to legend, the halcyon built its nest on the surface of the ocean and was able to quiet the winds while its eggs were hatching.